Tonight we walk into a place where the air itself hums. A valley in ancient India where the rivers boil in silver fog and the stars seem close enough to stir with a spoon. You crouch beside a clay pot resting on glowing embers. The scent of young leaves and river mist curls upward, wrapping your face like a silk scarf. Somewhere behind you, a night bird laughs, sharp and quick, as if mocking the seriousness of your mission. To learn how an ancient people used the heavens themselves to brew the perfect cup of tea. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? Trying to time tea leaves with constellations older than civilization. You probably won't survive this without spilling something on yourself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself barefoot on damp soil, moonlight painting your toes in silver. The villagers have already begun their nightly ritual. They lift bronze kettles toward the moon as if asking permission to boil water. The moon, bright, swollen, and gossiping with the clouds, watches them with patient curiosity. You can hear the bubbling of a dozen pots, the faint clink of ladles, the soft chant of farmers aligning their harvest with starlight. The belief, you learn, is simple yet poetic. The moon's pull doesn't just sway tides, it tugs at the oils within tea leaves, coaxing flavors to rise when the stars reach their proper angle. One farmer, his beard catching the glow like frost, tells you that the Rohini Nakshatra is the tea leaf's favorite. Under it, the plant drinks dew more sweetly, he insists. Historians still argue whether this belief was early agricultural observation or celestial storytelling gone deliciously too far. As the night deepens, you sense that time here doesn't tick, it breathes. Every rustle in the bamboo sounds like a page turning in a cosmic recipe book. You follow the rhythm as villagers match each action to a heavenly motion. Water boils when a certain star clears the ridge. Tea leaves are added when the moon slips behind a specific tree line. Someone mutters that to pour too soon is to offend the spirit of warmth. You believe them, mostly because the steam looks judgmental. Factually speaking, tea's earliest roots in India trace to wild Camellia sinensis plants along the northeastern hills. Archaeologists have found charred tea remnants dating centuries before written records mention brewing. But none of those carbon tests can capture the magic unfolding before you. The fusion of astronomy and aroma, faith and fermentation. A boy beside you points upward, naming constellations you half recognize. That's Mrigashira, the deer's head, he whispers. When it crosses the zenith, the leaves stop tasting bitter. He says it so confidently that even the wind seems to nod. You can almost feel the tea responding, tiny molecular shifts guided by celestial rhythm. Scientists today might call it coincidence, or microclimate patterns tied to lunar cycles. Yet under this sky, with steam coiling around your face, logic feels smaller than wonder. One elder, wearing what looks suspiciously like a blanket stolen from a temple elephant, recites an old verse. When the stars are steady, the leaves forgive heat. You interpret that as a reminder not to scald the tea, but he insists it's about patience. Brewing, in their world, isn't chemistry, it's choreography. Every gesture bows to something beyond sight. As you sip the first cup, the taste surprises you. It's earthy but light, like rain remembered rather than felt. There's a faint sweetness that reminds you of stone fruit and wood smoke. Maybe it's just the setting, but you swear you can taste the stars, some metallic shimmer you can't name. The villagers grin, proud of your awe. One pats your shoulder and says, "You are drinking the sky's reflection." There's a mainstream historical thread here. Ancient Indians, particularly in regions like Assam and the Himalayan foothills, were early observers of celestial cycles. They used them to time everything: planting, harvesting, even herbal concoctions. The Suya Siddhanta, an early astronomical text, maps planetary motion with astonishing precision. It's not far-fetched that these same calculations trickle down into culinary and medicinal rituals. When to boil, when to stir, when to rest, it was all a dance with the heavens. Some rural communities believed that if you brewed under a waning moon, your tea would steal energy from the stars, causing vivid dreams. One wandering mendicant even claimed he saw entire constellations swirl in his cup, a cosmic latte art, centuries before Instagram. Whether he was enlightened or just over-caffeinated, no one's sure. You notice the villagers pouring the final drops onto the ground, a gesture of gratitude. Steam rises, then fades like a sigh. The stars seem brighter now, as though they've accepted the offering. You take another sip, letting warmth slide through you. There's something humbling about realizing these people didn't separate science from spirit. To them, the cosmos wasn't distant, it was domestic, woven into chores, meals, and moonlit tea. Your host, a woman with eyes reflecting firelight, leans close and whispers. If you listen carefully, you'll hear the river boiling to the same rhythm as the stars. You tilt your head. Maybe she's right. The gurgling water syncs with the faint pulse of your heartbeat, or perhaps that's the caffeine finally kicking in. Either way, the harmony feels real. Somewhere in the forest, a dog barks, breaking the trance. You glance up. The moon has drifted slightly west, dragging a shimmer of mist across the valley. The villagers begin to tidy their kettles, movement slow, unhurried. This isn't the end of a ceremony, just another moment in their seamless relationship with the sky. You realize that for them, every night is a quiet collaboration with something vast. You take a deep breath, the scent of roasted leaves still hanging in the air. You can almost imagine each molecule vibrating with lunar rhythm, a silent percussion of flavor and faith. The stars will overhead, patient and unblinking, as if waiting for you to understand what they've been hinting at all along. That perfection in tea, like in life, might just be about timing your warmth with the universe's breath. The last embers crackle, glowing like miniature suns. You stand, stretch, and glance toward the horizon where tomorrow already stares in faint color. The villagers are gone, their footsteps erased by dew. Only the river murmurs now, and the scent of tea lingers, proof that somewhere between boiling and starlight, you've just sipped a piece of the cosmos. You stay by the riverside until the horizon lightens from black to indigo, watching how the stars slowly thin, each retreating behind a veil of dawn. The villagers have vanished, leaving behind faint footprints and the perfume of last night's brew. You can still taste it on your tongue, a ghost of smoke and dew. Somewhere, a rooster decides the cosmos has slept long enough. You stretch your arms, feeling the cool air carry the memory of boiling kettles. Your guide, an old man with a forehead creased like folded parchment, motions for you to follow. His name, he says, doesn't matter, because everyone here answers to the same title, one who watches the sky. You trail behind him through rows of tea bushes glistening with early mist. The leaves tremble slightly as if whispering their secrets to the dawn. He carries nothing but a reed staff and a small clay disc etched with circles and dots, his calendar of stars. The man explains that each circle marks a lunar mansion, or nakshatra, one of 27 constellations that guide the rhythm of planting, plucking, and brewing. You've heard of the zodiac, sure, but this feels different, more intimate, like the heavens are a daily planner rather than a distant spectacle. Tea listens to the moon, he says. We listen to both. You try not to roll your eyes too obviously. Sarcasm is wasted at this altitude. He stops at a hilltop where stones are arranged in neat lines pointing toward the rising sun. At first you think it's just a primitive observatory, but he laughs softly. Not primitive, practical. This tells us when to wake the leaves. He shows how, when the shadow of one stone touches another, It signals the season of Rohini, when sap climbs fastest through the stems and the first harvest begins. Mainstream historians note that such stone alignments did exist across ancient India, particularly at sites like Varanasi and Ujjain, functioning as solar and stellar observatories centuries before Galileo pointed his telescope upward. The old man continues, "When Kritika, the constellation of the fire mothers, rises, we pluck the tender buds. Fire must meet water." You like the poetry of that, even if it sounds like a horoscope written by a chef. Yet, as you run your fingers along a leaf, it's hard not to feel a pulse of connection. The plant seems alive in a way you hadn't noticed before, as if vibrating faintly with the rhythm of the sky. He opens a small pouch and lets you smell the dried leaves from last season. They carry a faint sweetness, almost fruity, nothing like the grassy bitterness you expect. "Rohini leaves," he says, "born under a gentle moon." Then he shows another batch, darker and heavier in aroma. Kritika Brew, bold, impatient. The difference is unmistakable. Whether it's chemistry, superstition, or sheer timing, you can't deny that something subtle shifts when the sky changes costume. You sit beside him as the sun climbs higher, washing the dew from the bushes. He draws circles in the date, marking lunar phases like slices of bread. Half moon for washing leaves, full moon for drying, new moon for silence. You blink. Silence. He nods. No boiling then. The moon hides, the water sleeps. Historians still argue whether lunar agriculture genuinely influenced yield or if people simply found comfort in cosmic order. Some scientists claim that gravitational pull affects sap flow, much like tides, making plants slightly more or less hydrated at different moon phases. Others dismiss it as charming folklore steeped in confirmation bias. You, meanwhile, are trying to remember if your kitchen kettle at home has ever synced with Jupiter. Probably not. Still, as the day warms, the rhythm of the explanation lulls you. He speaks of seasons not by months but by the moods of constellations, when the stars blush, when they quarrel, when they forgive. It's oddly human, this sky-to-soil relationship. You begin to wonder if maybe your ancestors weren't so different from these villagers, always searching upward for a reason, a pattern, a sign that the world makes sense, even in the small ritual of a morning drink. A few younger farmers arrive carrying woven baskets. They greet the old man respectfully and begin to pluck leaves with methodical grace. "Rohini smiles today," one of them says, and you swear the words change the scent of the air itself. Each leaf they pick seems to glitter briefly in the sunlight. You watch, hypnotized by the rhythm. Pluck, toss, hum. Pluck, toss, hum. It's like they're composing a slow song with the cosmos as conductor. During ancient times, certain tea makers would leave the first handful of leaves overnight beneath open skies so the starlight could ripen their soul. Some even claimed that starlit tea cured insomnia, a claim you find suspiciously ironic given the caffeine content. Yet he insists it's true, eyes twinkling. "The stars whisper calmness," he says. You decide not to mention that the only whisper you usually hear after too much tea is your heart doing drum solos. As afternoon approaches, he invites you into a shaded hut. Inside, carved wooden slats filter sunlight into shifting constellations on the floor. He unfolds an ancient parchment covered in constellations and Sanskrit verses. "Our ancestors charted the sky not for navigation," he explains, "but for flavor." He points to a passage describing how lunar conjunctions could alter the rosa, the taste essence of plants. You're not sure what's more impressive, the script's precision or the idea that someone once looked at Orion and thought, maybe a hint of nutty undertone. You trace one line with your finger, feeling the ridges of ink. Did they really believe this worked? He shrugs. Belief is a form of brewing. You add faith, you steep it in time, and something changes. His answer lingers longer than any scientific lecture could. Outside, the air smells sharper now, the mix of crushed leaves, soil, and sun-warmed bark. You feel slightly lightheaded, whether from altitude or revelation you can't tell. You imagine the countless generations who stood on this same hill, watching the same stars, their lives timed to a cosmic clock they couldn't touch yet trusted completely. Maybe, you think, they weren't brewing tea so much as brewing patience. A cloud drifts past, dimming the hillside. Your guide stands, dusting his hands. Tonight, he says, we watch Rohini rise. You will see how the stars tell us when to stop. He begins his slow walk back to the village, leaving you to trail behind, crunching through fallen leaves that smell faintly of caramel and curiosity. You glance skyward once more. Even in daylight, you can imagine where the stars will return, tiny punctures of light threading through eternity. You realize that every sip of tea you've ever taken might be a quiet echo of this choreography. Moon pulling tide, tide feeding soil, soil cradling leaf, leaf surrendering to water. The pattern is almost embarrassingly beautiful. You smile to yourself, thinking how absurdly human it is to seek cosmic approval for caffeine. And yet, under this infinite blue dome, it suddenly feels perfectly reasonable. By the time dusk folds over the valley again, you've learned that time here doesn't rush, it coils. The air smells of wood smoke and bruised leaves, and somewhere a bamboo flute sighs its way through a half-forgotten melody. You follow your guide back to the communal hearth, where a circle of villagers hunches over steaming kettles. The mood feels different tonight, more reverent, as if even the mosquitoes are afraid to buzz too loudly. The old man gestures toward a cluster of stars low in the east. That is Rohini returning, he says softly, and with her comes the flavor of the season. Around him, the others murmur prayers not to gods but to celestial hosts. Stars addressed like neighbors rather than deities. It's oddly intimate. One woman sprinkles crushed cardamom into the pot with a flick that looks rehearsed from generations of practice. You watch the way smoke rises, curling into thin silver ribbons. Someone adds ginger, another tosses a pinch of jaggery. Then, to your surprise, they wave bundles of dried herbs through the smoke as if seasoning the air itself. The scent turns complex, spicy, sweet, and faintly metallic, like the sky before rain. Your guide explains that each spice corresponds to a star. Cardamom for Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, he says. Cinnamon for the fire in Orion's belt. Clove for the North Star, it keeps you steady. You can't tell if this is myth or mnemonic device, but you scribble mental notes anyway. A star map that smells like dessert can't be a bad study tool. Mainstream history tells us that by the time of the Gupta Empire, Indian spice culture was already refined enough to merge culinary art with cosmology. Temples kept detailed almanacs noting when certain herbs should be harvested according to planetary alignments. The stars, quite literally, flavored their kitchens. Archaeologists have even uncovered copper vessels engraved with both constellations and recipes, suggesting that cooking, or brewing, was a kind of ritual astronomy. Tonight, as the first bubbles tremble on the surface of the tea, you sense that belief in those correspondences isn't just habit. It's rhythm. The villagers hum low notes matching the bubbling sound, and the harmonies vibrate in your chest like a warm echo. You catch yourself smiling, slightly hypnotized by the steam twisting upward toward Rohini's orange gleam. Your guide hands you a cup. The surface reflects the sky perfectly, a mirror of stars in miniature. He tells you to wait until a shooting star appears before taking the first sip. You glance up, skeptical, but within moments a brief streak of light cuts across the heavens. Everyone exhales together, a soft communal sigh, and drinks. You follow suit. The flavor hits like a story you've always known but forgotten. ginger sharpness giving way to cardamom calm, sweetness rounding the edges. You half expect to see constellations swirling inside the cup. That, the guide says, is star lore in liquid form. He tells you how ancient priests, known as Nakatravid, specialized in interpreting stellar influence on earthly elements, water, fire, herbs, even breath. They believed every brew carried a subtle vibration from its star of origin. If a tea was boiled under Kritika's fire, it was said to strengthen courage. Under Rohini's tenderness, it brought patience. Under Ardra's stormy constellation, it taught endurance. Historians still argue whether these categories reflected real botanical differences or moral allegories disguised as kitchen instructions. Either way, you find yourself sipping courage, patience, and endurance in alternating gulps. A fringe tidbit drifts into conversation. One villager mentions that during solar eclipses, they brewed no tea at all, fearing that the sun's shadow would steal the flavor. Another chimes in, claiming that a rare few intentionally brewed during eclipses to capture hidden strength. You can't help but imagine a secret league of rebel tea enthusiasts defying cosmic etiquette for better caffeine. If the ancient internet existed, you're sure there'd have been heated debates under the tag #eclipse brew fail. The night thickens. Sparks rise from the fire, joining the stars midair for an instant before fading. The rhythmic chanting grows softer, transforming into casual chatter. You catch snippets, arguments about which star favors turmeric, jokes about Jupiter having poor taste in herbs, laughter that feels as old as myth itself. Someone teases your guide, calling him the man who tastes the sky. He takes it as a compliment. You tilt your head back and imagine the entire Milky Way as a celestial spice rack. Galaxies of cumin, nebulae of nutmeg, black holes filled with pepper. You chuckle quietly, earning a curious glance from the old man. The stars are laughing with you, he says. You're not sure if that's comforting or mildly terrifying. The conversation drifts toward the idea of rasana, alchemy of taste and vitality. One younger villager insists that tea brewed under certain constellations can realign human temperament. If you drink Mars tea when angry, he warns, you'll dream of arguments for a week. His friend counters, saying he once drank Venus tea and only dreamed of lazy afternoons and misplaced sandals. The old man chuckles. Dreams are like steam, he says. They take the shape of the pot that holds them. Somewhere in that haze of warmth and spice, you realize that this star lore isn't just superstition. It's a worldview stitched together by observation, rhythm, and the simple desire to find pattern in chaos. It's astrology turned edible, myth made fragrant. You watch the embers settle into glowing coals. The villagers begin washing their cups, careful not to waste a drop. Each rinse is done with murmured thanks. You follow suit, pouring a few drops onto the earth. The steam rises briefly, then vanishes, a perfect metaphor for all human effort under the stars. Before heading back, your guide shows you a small clay jar sealed with wax. Inside, he says, rests the memory of last year's eclipse. You raise an eyebrow. You mean tea leaves? He smiles. Same thing. You can't decide if he's a philosopher or a hoarder, but you respect the dedication. As you walk back toward the huts, the night hums with insects and distant laughter. The stars feel closer now, as if leaning in to listen. You think about how much of human history boils down to this. Someone staring at the sky, someone else stirring a pot, both trying to make sense of what it means to be alive at the same moment the universe is. The last sound before sleep is the faint hiss of cooling kettles, the smell of cardamom lingering like a lullaby. You drift off thinking that maybe tomorrow you'll learn which constellation pairs best with a hint of sarcasm, perhaps that one twinkling just above Orion's shoulder. The following evening smells like damp stone and patience. You trail after the old man up a slope where rough slabs of granite rise from the ground like half-finished thoughts. This, he says, is where the stars are weighed. At first glance, it looks like ruins, but then you see narrow slots cut through the rock, perfectly aligned with the horizon. When the wind pauses, a single star slides into one of those gaps and glows through it as if caught in a keyhole. A gasp leaves your throat before you remember to look unimpressed. He chuckles. Our ancestors built these before temples. Temples came later, after they learned that worship begins with looking. In your city-bred mind, observatories belong to domes and telescopes. Yet here, centuries before Galileo, they used shadows and starlight to predict harvests, and, apparently, flavor. A mainstream historical fact. Places like Ujjain and Jaipur house such ancient observatories, stone computers tracking the sky with eerie precision. Even the water clock below, the old man adds, once ticked with drops that fell in rhythm to Orion. He leads you to a platform where smoke from several small fires drifts lazily upward. Women sit grinding herbs, their hands moving in measured circles that mimic the sky's rotation. You realize every sound, the scrape of stone, the soft hiss of boiling water, has tempo. The whole observatory hums like a giant metronome tuned to the cosmos. One woman lifts a kettle and lets you smell the brew. It's strong, metallic, almost electric. Planet tea, she says proudly. Boiled when Saturn touched the moon. You blink. And that matters because... She grins. Because then bitterness turns wise. You sip. It's shockingly good. The aftertaste lingers like rain on copper. The old man produces thin bronze rods and angles them toward the firelight. Each measures a planet's shadow. When the shadow matches the mark, we change the heat. Too much flame under Mars, and you invite quarrels. Too little under Venus, and sweetness sulks. Historians still argue whether these observatories doubled as laboratories or were purely ceremonial. You suspect both, half science, half superstition, all theater. A younger apprentice takes notes on palm leaves, muttering calculations. You peek over his shoulder. The script mixes Sanskrit with numbers that look suspiciously trigonometric. He notices your curiosity. We call it Jyotirosa, the taste of light, he says, proud as any grad student defending a thesis. You're tempted to ask for his research funding source but decide sarcasm might not translate well in a sacred lab. According to local legend, one astrologer once claimed he could predict a storm's arrival by tasting the day's tea. If it turned faintly metallic, rain was coming. His record, your guide admits, was about 50-50. Better odds than most weather apps, you mutter. He nods solemnly, having never used one. As night falls, the stars align neatly above the stone corridors. Shadows lengthen like precise handwriting. A conch shell sounds, deep and slow. The entire group rises and faces east. The old man raises a ladle high, letting the liquid pour in a shimmering arc. It catches starlight midair and lands in the pot with a hiss. Now the brew knows its direction, he says. You think about modern baristas who brag about water temperature and grind size, and you can't help smirking. These people use Jupiter's orbit as a timer. You whisper, talk about single origin beans. He turns toward you. What did you say? Nothing, you reply quickly, just admiring the accuracy. You sit on a low wall, notebook in lap, scribbling fragments you'll never publish. Around you, apprentices adjust mirrors of polished brass, bouncing moonlight into clay bowls. The reflections shimmer like miniature galaxies. The old man explains that they believe each beam charges the water with planetary essence. You know enough physics to guess it's mostly heat and reflection, but under this velvet sky, you let belief win for once. Another historical note sneaks in. Indian astronomers such as Aryabhata and Vahamihira calculated lunar eclipses centuries before Europe rediscovered geometry. The instruments before you, simple yet exact, could track celestial motion to fractions of a degree. If they happened to stir a pot of tea while waiting for the data, who could blame them? Observation is thirsty work. You ask how long they've been brewing like this. As long as the stars have told stories, he replies. When they stop, we will switch to plain water. A shiver runs through you. It's unclear whether that's a prophecy or just practical planning for the apocalypse. The apprentices pass around cups. You taste theirs, bitter, smoky, slightly salty. The old man nods approvingly. Mars tea. For strength. Your lips tingle, your heartbeat skips. Maybe caffeine, maybe cosmic encouragement. He laughs at your expression. Don't worry. The sky rarely overdoses anyone. A faint mist creeps across the stones. The fires dim, leaving only moonlight. Shadows of pillars cut the ground into perfect squares of silver and black. Someone starts humming, another joins, and soon the whole observatory vibrates with low harmony. It's music without melody, more heartbeat than song. The stars above seem to pulse with it. You close your eyes, half expecting gravity to shift. In that blur between waking and dreaming, you sense how these people saw no wall between observation and worship, between chemistry and faith. Measuring angles was prayer. Boiling leaves was an equation solved by taste buds. You suddenly envy their seamless logic. In your world, the lab and the kitchen occupy separate continents. Here, they shower cup. The old man breaks your reverie. Tomorrow, he says, we brew in daylight to thank the sun. But tonight, let the moon finish your lesson. He hands you one last sip. It's cooler now, smoother, as though starlight itself has steeped a little longer. You drink slowly, feeling the metallic edge mellow into something almost sweet. The conch sounds again. Everyone bows to the horizon where a single bright planet hovers. Jupiter rises, someone murmurs. He approves. You glance at the pot, half expecting it to sparkle. Instead, it merely steams, patient and unassuming. You laugh quietly at yourself, the sound swallowed by mist. Somewhere below, the river answers with a low murmur. The air grows heavy with the scent of wet stone, ashes, and cardamom. You wrap your shawl tighter and sit still as the observatory settles into silence, its instruments cooling under the indifferent glitter of stars. For the first time, you begin to understand that to them, the universe wasn't out there, it was simmering right here, one measured shadow at a time. By the next morning, the air feels lighter, as though the valley itself has exhaled overnight. You wake to a chorus of kettles hissing like impatient serpents and the faraway crackle of wood being coaxed into flame. The smell of roasted leaves follows you out of your hut, earthy, slightly floral, with that faint metallic edge you're starting to recognize as the taste of astronomy. Your guide greets you with a grin that could outshine sunrise. Today, he says, you will learn to drink direction. Before you can protest that you already have a terrible sense of it, he places a bamboo cup in your hands and gestures toward the hills. We walk east. Always east. You trek along narrow paths lined with wild ginger and lemongrass, the ground still wet with dawn dew. The villagers' laughter trails behind you. Apparently, watching a city visitor stumble over roots is premium entertainment. By the time you reach a small clearing, the sun is high enough to glint off polished bamboo rods arranged in a rough spiral. At the center, an elderly monk sits cross-legged beside a bundle of maps. These, your guide whispers reverently, are the okoshol leaves, the charts of our tea astrologers. Each strip of bamboo is engraved with tiny symbols, stars carved beside brewing notes. Boil when Rohini breathes, pour when Mars yawns. You crouch closer, tracing the faint grooves. Some are stained dark, as if soaked in tea. The monk notices and smiles. Ink fades, he says, but flavor remembers. He invites you to sit. A small clay pot bubbles gently beside him, its lid rocking to a rhythm you suspect only he can hear. He explains that these bamboo charts map not only the sky but the temperament of the brews themselves. If your star sits near Kritika, he says, you must stir counterclockwise, fire needs restraint. If born under Pushya, you stir with your right hand, water must be guided. Historians have long noted that Indian monks and wandering scholars recorded their astronomical knowledge on palm and bamboo leaves, many found in monasteries stretching from Nalanda to the Himalayas. But none of those official manuscripts mention tea. Still, standing here, surrounded by both steam and constellations, you begin to suspect some scholar simply edited that part out, deciding celestial tea brewing sounded too unacademic. The monk hands you a chart. Choose your star, he instructs. You squint at the tangled diagrams, pretending competence. This one looks friendly, you say, pointing at a cluster shaped vaguely like a teapot. He chuckles. That's Ardra, the storm. Figures, you mutter. He instructs you to pour a ladle of boiling water into your cup, then to wait until a breeze brushes your cheek before sipping. The wind, he says, is the messenger of stars. It will tell you when the flavor is complete. Naturally, there's no breeze for a full minute. You sit there awkwardly while the others watch in serene silence. Finally, the faintest whisper of air skims past your face. You sip. The tea is bright and sharp, with a citrus tang you can't explain. See, the monk beams. The sky speaks. You want to argue that thermodynamics, not the zodiac, controls flavor extraction, but then you catch yourself smiling. Because, honestly, isn't it nicer to imagine your cup as an echo of the cosmos? A younger monk sets down a woven mat covered in tiny clay figurines shaped like teapots, cups, and stars. These are our memory markers, he explains. When we travel, we place them according to the constellations we can see. Then we brew, and the tea tastes like home. A charming thought, portable nostalgia by way of geometry. Historians still debate whether such figurines served ritual or mnemonic purposes, though several have been unearthed near ancient caravan routes, etched with unfamiliar celestial patterns. The monk mentions a forgotten sect called the Chha Jyotishis, tea seers, who allegedly predicted personality traits based on one's brewing habits. Stir too often, and you're impulsive. Wait too long, and you're melancholic. Burn the leaves, and you're doomed to repeat past mistakes. You joke. So basically, astrology meets barista critique. He nods gravely. Exactly. As the afternoon stretches, you help them record their readings. Each note correlates with a constellation's shift. Orion rises, add pepper. Venus wanes, reduce milk. The precision is absurdly beautiful. You can't tell if they are brewing tea or orchestrating a galactic symphony. The monk leans close. When we write, he says, we are not predicting. We are remembering. The stars already brewed the first tea. We only repeat their recipe. You let the thought settle like sediment at the bottom of a cup. Later, as the shadows lengthen, the monks gather to share the final pot of the day. The aroma alone could make poets faint. Honey, smoke, something floral and faintly metallic. You notice how each monk sits at a precise angle relative to the sun, like human sundials. Bamboo remembers direction, your guide explains. If you face wrong, it squeaks. You're tempted to test it, but decide your dignity has taken enough hits for one afternoon. They pass the pot around. You sip, closing your eyes. For a fleeting second, you feel perfectly aligned. Body, breath, and the lazy orbit of planets you'll never touch. The warmth spreads through your chest, not sharp like caffeine but deep, steady, tidal. As twilight thickens, the monks roll up their bamboo charts and tuck them into cloth bags. Tea is done for the day, one says. Now we watch stars with empty cups. You mimic them, raising your own cup to the sky. The first stars flicker awake, faint and fragile. The bamboo charts creak softly as they cool, a sound like the sky whispering goodnight. You glance at your guide. So, tomorrow. He grins. Tomorrow, we meet Jupiter. He likes jasmine. You laugh, because of course he does. Dawn unfurls like a slow yawn across the valley, and sure enough, you wake to find your guide already waiting with a garland of jasmine draped around his neck. The fragrance is bright, almost mischievous, chasing away whatever dreams you had about bamboo charts floating in space. He grins. Jupiter is awake, he says, and he's thirsty. You're not entirely sure what planetary hydration entails, but you follow him anyway. Today's destination is a ridge overlooking both the river and a massive stone circle. At its center, a kettle the size of a small bathtub steams gently, surrounded by villagers arranging baskets of jasmine blossoms. The air glows with white petals and sunlight, as though someone tipped a bowl of stars over the world. Your guide gestures toward the horizon where, faint in daylight, a pale dot hangs above the mist. That is Brihaspati, he says, Jupiter's Sanskrit name. Teacher of the gods. He rules wisdom, generosity, and the sweetness of things. He chuckles, and he's fond of jasmine, because even planets have preferences. You can't resist. So, are you telling me this tea is astrologically endorsed by Jupiter? He nods solemnly. Endorsed, sponsored, perhaps even co-brewed. You sigh. That's quite a collaboration. Still, there's something endearing about their conviction. Each blossom they drop into the pot lands like a tiny comet, sizzling for an instant before surrendering to the amber liquid. A group of children fan the steam toward the east with palm leaves, sending fragrant clouds drifting uphill. Historically speaking, the pairing of plants and planets isn't new. In ancient Indian Ayurveda, herbs were often associated with celestial bodies: sun for vitality, moon for calm, Mars for heat, Venus for fertility, and Jupiter for growth and balance. So perhaps brewing jasmine under Jupiter's gaze wasn't superstition but continuity of that logic, aroma as alignment. The old man steps forward with what looks like a measuring stick carved with planetary symbols. He dips it into the kettle, pulls it out, and watches the droplets slide off. Almost ready, he murmurs. Jupiter's shadow just kissed the rim. You lean closer, trying to spot this alleged shadow, but all you see is your own reflection, looking skeptical and slightly damp. He catches your doubt and laughs softly. You cannot always see the teaching, only taste it. Someone nearby bangs a bronze gong 3 times. The villagers fall silent. One woman scatters crushed turmeric onto the ground, a golden carpet for the planet's blessing. The air thickens with scent, jasmine, spice, smoke, and that faint ozone tang that always seems to appear when belief becomes palpable. They begin to pour the tea into dozens of small cups, forming a circle on the earth that mirrors the stars above. The sight alone would make any influencer weep with aesthetic jealousy. You're handed one of the cups. Its rim is warm, its contents shimmering like molten topaz. Drink with the left hand, your guide instructs. The right one belongs to the sun. You oblige, careful not to spill planetary wisdom on your shoes. The first sip surprises you. It's unlike any tea you've tasted. The jasmine floats above the tongue, bright and floral, but underneath runs a subtle note of something deeper, almost mineral. Sweetness lingers, but it's disciplined, never cloying. Jupiter teaches moderation. The guide says, watching you closely. Even sweetness must know when to stop. You can't help smirking. So Jupiter's basically the cosmic version of portion control. He grins. Exactly. Except he grades on generosity. The group breaks into soft conversation. One man claims that tea brewed under Jupiter improves memory. Another insists it helps people keep promises. It makes words heavier, he says. They don't float away so easily. A young girl pipes up. Last time I drank Jupiter tea, I remembered my chores. Everyone cheers as though she's achieved enlightenment through cleanliness. Your guide tells you that centuries ago, wandering merchants carried small pouches of jasmine tea labeled with planetary symbols as good luck charms. When business deals soured, they'd brew a Jupiter infusion to sweeten negotiations. Some even buried used leaves near trade posts, believing it would bless future travelers. Archaeologists have reportedly found these buried offerings near ancient caravanserais, tiny, fragrant time capsules of optimism. Meanwhile, you try another sip and notice how calm your body feels. Maybe it's the caffeine balancing with the morning breeze, or maybe it's the subtle suggestion that a planet's watching over your metabolism. Either way, you're oddly content. Historians still argue whether ancient planetary associations influenced actual agriculture or merely ritual storytelling. Did farmers genuinely track Jupiter's rise before harvesting jasmine, or did priests retrofit the myth after the fact? The debate continues, as debates always do, but in this moment it doesn't matter. The steam rising from your cup feels more persuasive than any peer-reviewed paper. Your guide begins to hum, a deep, melodic vibration that seems to ripple through the ground. The villagers join in, forming harmonies that mimic wind moving through bamboo. You close your eyes. For a moment, the hum becomes the planet's own bass note vibrating through everything: kettle, cup, chest, sky. When the sound fades, the tea is gone. The old man overturns his cup onto the earth, letting the last drop vanish into the soil. Now Jupiter will remember us, he says. And perhaps send rain, or wisdom, whichever comes first. You linger, watching petals swirl in the cooling tea vat like white galaxies in amber space. The sun climbs higher, scattering shards of light off the rim of every cup. You think of how billions of years separate you from the stars above, and yet here you are, pretending to sip their reflections. The line between metaphor and physics feels blurry, and honestly, you like it that way. On your way back to the village, your guide claps your shoulder. Next, he announces, you must witness the debates. Scholars. Arguments. Fire in cups. You groan playfully. So, less astronomy, more philosophy. He winks. Same stars. Louder voices. As you walk, the jasmine scent clings to your clothes. It feels almost alive, as if Jupiter's laughter has hitched a ride home with you. You can't help smiling, the kind of smile that says you'll never again look at a cup of tea without checking whether a planet might be watching. By the time you reach the main courtyard again, the air is thick with smoke, chatter, and the distinct crackle of intellectual ego warming up. The scholars your guide mentioned turn out to be a lively mix of monks, traders, farmers, and one woman who claims she once argued philosophy with a parrot. They've gathered around a semicircle of kettles arranged like a miniature amphitheater, each one marked with a symbol: sun, moon, star, and flame. This, your guide announces grandly, is the Sabha of steam. He pauses for effect. They argue about everything: stars, heat, bitterness, destiny. And they never agree. You blink. Sounds like a YouTube comment section. He laughs. Yes, but with better tea and fewer insults. The debate begins with the clanging of a ladle against copper. An elder steps forward, robe frayed at the edges, eyes gleaming like he's just brewed enlightenment itself. A perfect cup, he declares, depends on the star of origin. The water's birth hour defines its temperament. Another scholar, a younger man with a perpetual smirk, scoffs. Water has no birth hour. It is eternal. Tea depends on fire and time, not constellations. The sky merely watches. The crowd murmurs, half in agreement, half in dramatic disbelief. You can't tell if they are discussing metaphysics or just passive-aggressively critiquing each other's tea-making. You settle into the shade, sipping a trial brew passed to you by a child assistant who whispers, "This one's neutral, no planetary bias." The flavor is balanced but oddly bland, like diplomacy in liquid form. The elder continues, waving his cup toward the heavens. When the moon enters Asta, the leaves soften. That's when you draw them from the flame. Otherwise, you drink impatience. The younger man grins. Then why did my teacher brew under Baroni and still make nectar? Luck, the elder fires back. Luck in stubborn youth. Your guide leans toward you. This has gone on for centuries, he murmurs. Even in ancient Nalanda, scholars fought over whether the stars dictate or merely decorate the act of brewing. Historically, he's right. The Nalanda University archives mention heated disputes between astronomers and ritualists. One account describes a monk refusing to serve tea to anyone who didn't first recite planetary invocations, a bold stance in a monastic cafeteria. Historians still argue whether those notes reflect genuine conflict or were exaggerated by bored scribes seeking drama. Either way, the tension was real: science versus symbolism, heat versus heaven. The debate grows louder. Someone brings out a bowl of tea leaves to serve as evidence. The younger scholar holds one up dramatically. "This leaf," he proclaims, "cares nothing for Jupiter or Rahu. It only knows soil and rain." A woman counters, "Soil and rain are the stars made earthbound. You cannot separate them without killing the poetry." That earns applause from the poet's faction, who appear delighted by any chance to merge astronomy with vows. Then comes the first actual brewing duel of the day. 2 kettles, 2 methods, 1 celestial chart. The elder chooses to brew while facing north, invoking Polaris as the steady flame. The younger turns west, saying sunsets hold more honesty. They brew in tense silence, both pretending not to care that the entire crowd is holding its breath. When the cups are poured, you're invited to taste both. The elder's tea is calm, deep, and slightly woody. The younger's is bright and sharp, with an aftertaste that almost stings the tongue. "Which do you prefer?" your guide whispers. You consider your options carefully. "They both taste like people trying to be right," you reply. He laughs so loudly that both scholars glare at you. "Ah," says the elder, "we have a diplomat among us." "Or a coward," mutters the younger. You shrug. "Depends on the star alignment." Laughter breaks the tension. Cups are refilled. Someone starts a chant, not religious, more like a rhythmic hum that syncs with the bubbling kettles. You feel it vibrate in your chest. The air seems to pulse in time with the sound, like the valley itself is breathing. One of the monks tells you a story of the first argument. Long ago, 2 starseers brewed the same leaves under opposite skies, one under a new moon, one under a full. When they met to compare, their teas tasted identical. The legend says the gods laughed so hard they spilled starlight across the Himalayas, creating the Milky Way. Quirky, yes, but also strangely comforting. Even divine beings appreciate cosmic irony. As the sun tilts westward, the tone shifts. The debate softens into storytelling. The scholars share theories like gossip, some claiming tea leaves remember constellations through the minerals in water, others insisting human breath alters starlight's flavor during exhale. You sip quietly, letting their words swirl around you like steam from different cups, each warm, fleeting, fragrant. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were proto-scientific discussions or ritual theater, your guide murmurs. Perhaps both. Maybe this is how knowledge stayed alive, half experiment, half bedtime story. You smile. So basically, TED Talk meets village fair. He nods. Exactly. With better snacks. As dusk arrives, the scholars pour the remaining tea into a communal basin, mixing all flavors together. They call it samagra, the tea of agreement. Everyone drinks, not for taste, but for peace. It's slightly bitter, but you suspect that's the point. The elder lifts his cup and announces, "Stars may disagree, but steam rises the same." The crowd murmurs approval. You catch yourself nodding along, feeling unexpectedly sentimental about boiling water and celestial metaphors. Before the crowd disperses, your guide whispers, "Tomorrow, we travel west, to where shadow meets reflection. There, you'll taste moonlight." You laugh softly. "I was wondering when we'd get to lunar beverages." He smirks. "Prepare your tongue for silence." As torches flicker to life, smoke curls upward like ghostly script against the darkening sky. The last thing you see before returning to your hut is a child drawing constellations in spilled tea, connecting drops with her fingertip. Her pattern forms something you can't quite name, but it feels familiar, like déjà vu written in liquid gold. You wake that night to a strange glow slipping through the cracks of your hut. It's not firelight or dawn, it's moonlight, heavy and deliberate, like someone poured silver into the air. The valley hums with quiet, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full, an unspoken promise of discovery waiting for your feet to move. Your guide is already outside, lantern in hand, face painted with soft lunar shimmer. "You're awake," he whispers, as if surprised that mortals still obey the call of sleep. "Perfect. Tonight we drink the moon." You almost make a joke about lactose intolerance and lunar milk, but stop yourself. The air feels sacred, too fragile for sarcasm. Instead, you just nod and follow. The path curves westward, tracing the spine of the valley. Grass glows faintly, each blade silver-tipped, as though the stars decided to practice calligraphy on the landscape. After a long walk, you reach a plateau where the river widens into a mirror. A group of villagers stands knee-deep in the shallows, laying smooth stones in concentric circles. At the center sits a bronze pot that catches moonlight like it's designed for it. Around it, cups are arranged in neat rows, their rims glistening like small halos. Your guide lowers his lantern. "This is Chandra Chai, the moon tea." He gestures toward the water. It must be brewed without flame. The heat comes from reflection. You blink. "You mean, you boil it with moonlight?" He grins. "You could say that. Or you could admit that boiling is overrated." Sure enough, the tea isn't boiling at all. The water inside the pot ripples gently, and somehow, impossibly, steam still rises. Maybe it's residual heat, maybe some chemical trick, or maybe the night has its own physics. You watch, enthralled, as the steam twists upward, silver instead of white. The villagers begin a soft chant. Each voice slides into the next like water over stone. You can't make out the words, but the rhythm feels familiar, slow, deliberate, as though designed to lull even the stars to sleep. According to ancient Indian lore, moonlight wasn't just light, it was nourishment. Old Ayurvedic texts speak of somarasa, the essence of the moon, believed to cool the body and soothe the mind. Some scholars say that's why night teas were popular among wandering sages. They balanced the fire of intellect with lunar calm. One woman approaches with a bowl of milky leaves, pale green, almost translucent. "These," she says softly, "grew under the last full moon. We harvest only the ones that shine at night." You resist the urge to ask how they tell, because frankly, they might actually glow. She drops the leaves into the shimmering pot, and the water responds. Tiny sparks of light blink beneath the surface, like constellations awakening. The scent that rises is delicate and cool, carrying notes of mint, river stone, and something unplaceably sweet, like memory itself. Your guide motions for you to kneel beside the pot. "Close your eyes," he says. "Listen to the moon." You obey. The chant deepens. The river's murmur grows rhythmic, hypnotic. Then, there it is, a faint hum beneath everything, too subtle to be sound, too real to be imagination. The moon isn't silent, it's whispering through vibration, through the shimmer of air and the pulse in your own veins. You exhale slowly. Somewhere deep inside, your heartbeat adjusts to match it. When you open your eyes, the villagers are pouring the tea into silver cups. Each one reflects your face like a fractured mirror. "Do not drink all at once," your guide cautions. "Sip in thirds. The first for clarity, the second for memory, the third for surrender." You raise the cup. The liquid looks like melted pearl. The first sip is startling, icy, yet not cold. The flavor is clean, almost non-existent, like the ghost of sweetness. It makes your thoughts feel crisp, rearranged. You blink twice, as though your inner lens just refocused. The second sip settles deeper, tugging something long forgotten from within, a scent from childhood, a face you can't name, the rhythm of an old lullaby. You're not hallucinating, you're remembering in flavor form. By the third sip, your shoulders have melted. The valley's stillness enters you. Even your sarcasm goes quiet, respectfully asleep. Now, your guide murmurs, "Watch the surface." You look into the remaining tea. The moon's reflection ripples. And then, impossibly, it shifts. Instead of one white disk, you see dozens of moons swirling together, like a sky inside your cup. Your breath catches. "What is this?" He smiles. The mind, when still, mirrors infinity. The tea only helps it remember how. It's poetic nonsense, but you'll be damned if it doesn't feel true. Historians still argue whether these so-called moon teas were genuine beverages or meditative metaphors. Some believe the reflective ritual symbolized self-observation, the cup as consciousness, the liquid as awareness. Others insist that ancient practitioners used minerals that reacted to moonlight, causing faint luminescence. Either explanation fits, depending on which side of wonder you stand. The ritual continues. Villagers pour their leftover tea back into the river. The current carries it downstream, scattering silver streaks over the water's skin. You imagine fish below, suddenly enlightened and wondering if they've just had their first existential crisis. Your guide plucks one jasmine petal from your sleeve, left over from Jupiter's brew, and drops it into the river. "Every tea returns to the source," he says. "Even moonlight must sleep." You nod, though you're still half entranced. "So what happens next?" "Next," he says, smiling faintly. "We chase the light that doesn't burn." You raise an eyebrow. "Let me guess, starlight tea." He shakes his head. "Starlight is easy. We seek the tea that hides in shadow." A chill ripples through the air, as if the night itself shivers at the thought. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls, a single, deliberate sound that feels like punctuation. The villagers begin to pack their tools, their movements slow, reverent. You linger for one last look at the river. The moon's reflection has settled into stillness again, perfect and undisturbed, as though it never danced in your cup. You realize your hands smell faintly of mint and memory. And though your body feels heavy with fatigue, Your mind hums like it's just been polished. You think of how absurd it all sounds, brewing moonlight. But somehow, it's less absurd than anything else you've known. Your guide gestures toward the distant dark ridge. Get some rest, he says. Tomorrow, we descend to the caves. There, the stars are born again. You sigh, half dreading, half eager. Does that mean more walking? He grins. Yes. But gravity will do most of the work this time. As you make your way back down the glowing path, the moon follows you, an unblinking, watchful companion. Somewhere behind you, the river keeps its silver secret, and the night folds itself neatly around your shoulders. Morning returns slow and smoky, as if the night still clings to the edges of the valley, reluctant to surrender. You wake to a soft rumble beneath your feet, the mountains muttering in their sleep. The villagers move quietly, packing bundles of dried leaves, brass cups, and what looks suspiciously like a compass carved out of bone. Your guide greets you with an enthusiasm that feels too vertical for your current state of mind. Today, he says, we go down to the caves where stars are born, and sometimes lost. Great, you mumble. Because my legs were getting bored of horizontal walking. He laughs. Gravity loves those who mock it. You'll see. The trail begins just beyond the river, where the ground turns slick with moss and the sunlight thins into ribbons. You follow your guide into the shadows, your breath misting in the cool air. The entrance to the cave yawns like a waiting mouth, dark and damp. The scent of mineral earth fills your nose, iron, stone, and the faint, ghostly sweetness of dried herbs. Lanterns flicker to life. Their flames tremble as if aware that this place belongs more to echoes than to humans. The first chamber is vast, its ceiling painted with constellations, hundreds of them, carved and inlaid with shards of mica. When the light hits right, they shimmer, recreating the night sky underground. Welcome, your guide whispers, to the Nakshatra Gufa, the cave of stars. He sets a clay pot on the floor, directly beneath a natural shaft of light slicing through the rock. Here, he says, we brew what the ancients called anda chai, the tea of shadows. You raise an eyebrow. Shadow tea? Sounds goth. He chuckles. You'll like it. It's brewed with patience, fear, and the faintest courage. According to ancient folklore, this cave was where early astronomer priests observed the night through reflective minerals in the rock. They noticed that even when the stars disappeared from sight, their positions could be predicted by subtle light patterns, faint glimmers on wet stone. Over centuries, those observations turned into ritual, brewing tea in the dark to taste hidden stars. You crouch near the pot as your guide empties a pouch of crushed herbs into it. The mixture smells strange, earthy, spicy, with a metallic undertone that prickles your tongue just from breathing it in. What's in that? You ask. Tea leaves grown in perpetual shade, he says. They never saw sunlight. They learned to drink darkness instead. There's a hint of pride in his tone, as though he's describing his most introverted child. He pours cold spring water over the leaves, then covers the pot with a lid made of polished obsidian. No fire, no stirring. Just silence. Isn't it going to stay cold? You ask. He smiles faintly. The mountain has its own warmth. Wait, and it will rise. You sit cross-legged beside the pot. The cave is so still you can hear the soft crackle of rock cooling, the drip of water somewhere deep inside. Gradually, the lid begins to quiver. Steam, dark, silvery, and unnervingly slow, leaks out. It carries a scent unlike any tea you've met, smoky and mineral, like rain falling on metal. This tea, your guide murmurs, is for when you cannot see the stars but still believe they are there. You take that in quietly. There's something strangely comforting about the thought that the absence of light doesn't mean the absence of order. Historians have long debated whether caves like this were actually used for astronomical observation or purely for spiritual rites. Some argue they were early laboratories of optics, studying reflection and refraction before telescopes existed. Others say they were built as sanctuaries for initiates to experience sensory deprivation and see stars with the mind rather than the eyes. Either way, the myth of brewing tea in the dark survives as an act of patience, a reminder that heat and vision both come from trust. After a long wait, your guide removes the lid. The surface of the liquid is black as ink, absorbing every glimmer of lantern light. "Sip slowly," he says. "Shadow tea has opinions." You lift the cup to your lips, hesitant. The first taste is smoky, bitter, almost metallic, but not unpleasant. It lingers like the aftertaste of rain on stone. The bitterness gives way to something softer, deeper, like charcoal whispering apologies. "It tastes grounded," you say. He nods. "Good. It's meant to remind you that the stars are not above us. They are below too, buried, waiting." He gestures around the cave. The ancients believed every time a star died, its ashes fell to earth and became metal. So every ore vein, every rock, is a grave of a star. When we brew in darkness, we honor that. You glance at the shimmering constellations carved into the ceiling, then at the dull stone beneath your feet. It hits you suddenly. You're sitting between two skies, one above, one below. You can't tell which feels more infinite. Your guide tells you that some mountain tribes used to leave cups of dark tea at cave mouths during eclipses, claiming the moon's shadow would drink them. If the cups were empty by morning, they said it meant the gods accepted the offering. If full, they blamed weak tea. You smirk. That sounds like celestial customer feedback. He grins. Exactly. The first Yelp reviews were written in shadow. You both laugh softly, and the sound bounces through the chamber like liquid light. After the final sip, your guide takes the pot and pours what's left into a crack in the stone. "This is the offering," he explains. "Every cup must return what it learns." The darkness feels warmer now, alive somehow. The mica constellations shimmer brighter, as if the cave itself is waking. The steam rises higher, spreading across the ceiling until the stars seem to pulse, breathing in rhythm with your own lungs. You realize how long you've been sitting in silence. Your thoughts feel slower, denser, like they've been steeped too long and turned wise. "Tomorrow," your guide says quietly, "we climb again. Toward the ridge of smoke. There, the wind itself brews the tea." You sigh, rubbing your knees. "So we've done sunlight tea, moonlight tea, and now shadow tea. What's next? Air tea?" He grins. "Exactly. The most invisible flavor of all." As you leave the cave, the morning light slices back through the opening. The contrast blinds you for a moment. The brightness feels almost violent after all that dark serenity. You turn once more to look back. The cave's mouth seems to wink, the darkness within folding shut like an eye gone to sleep. You take a deep breath, catching the last trace of mineral smoke on your tongue. Somehow, you feel heavier and lighter at once, like you've swallowed part of the mountain and it's quietly rearranging your gravity. By dawn, the valley feels restless again, as though the earth itself is stretching after a long meditation. Mist curls up from the river, soft as steam, and the first sunlight slices through in golden shards. You step outside and find your guide already waiting at the foot of a narrow, steep path that climbs the ridge behind the village. The wind there howls like an impatient kettle. He grins, clearly energized by your groggy disapproval. "Today," he declares, "you will drink what cannot be poured." You squint. "Air tea." He nods solemnly. "Exactly. The breath of mountains. The tea of nothing. You groan. Perfect. My favorite flavor, existential. You begin the climb. The path winds through switchbacks and loose shale, and every gust of wind feels like a critique of your fitness level. Halfway up, you stop to catch your breath, and your guide laughs. Good, he says. You are already brewing. Brewing what, exactly? You manage between gasps. Your lungs, he replies. They are the first kettles. You can't even argue with that level of poetic logic. After an hour of climbing, the terrain evens out into a ridge that overlooks the entire valley. Below, the river glitters like a spilled ribbon of mercury. The wind is fierce, tugging at your clothes, your hair, your thoughts. A circle of stones marks the brewing ground. No pots, no fire, just an array of hollow bamboo tubes stuck upright in the soil, each humming faintly when the wind passes through. This, your guide announces with theatrical flourish, is Vayu chai, the wind tea. He gestures toward the bamboo tubes. Each one sings a different note. Together they form the brew. You blink. So, the wind makes the tea. He nods. Yes. You only taste when it's done. The villagers who've joined you sit cross-legged, their faces turned into the gale. Each holds a small cup, empty, waiting. Your guide hands you one. You must catch the breath of the world, he says. When the sound shifts, hold your cup up. You sit beside him, watching the bamboo pipes quiver. The tones rise and fall, a melody born of air and accident. At first it sounds chaotic, a chorus of flutes arguing in a storm, but then a pattern emerges, subtle and looping. The wind itself seems to exhale in rhythm. The ancients believed, he explains, that air carries memory. When a star dies, its breath drifts across space. Every gust is a whisper from a forgotten world. You can't help smiling. So when I sneeze, I'm basically expelling stardust. He chuckles. In the most sacred way possible. Historically, there's a kernel of truth buried under his mysticism. Ancient Indian astronomers did associate air and sound with cosmic principles. Vayu, wind, representing movement and life force. Early yogic texts even described breath as a medium for transmitting celestial energy, a kind of universal Wi-Fi long before Reuters. Your guide lifts his face toward the sky. Listen, he murmurs. The wind thickens. You hear it too. The pitch deepens, as though the air has decided to slow its heartbeat. The bamboo pipes vibrate, and faint trails of mist swirl between them. Your guide raises his cup, you mimic him. The wind whips through the circle, and for a brief, uncanny moment, you see vapor condense above your cup, a fragile, spinning funnel of fog. It twists downward, dissolving into liquid. You stare. That actually worked. He grins. Did you doubt? You peer into the cup. A small pool of pale liquid trembles there, clear as breath, cool as morning. You sip cautiously. The taste is astonishing, cleaner than water, sharper than snow. It feels like drinking clarity itself, every nerve waking up and sighing in relief. It tastes like altitude, you whisper. He nods. That's how you know it's done. The villagers drink too, eyes half closed in silent appreciation. Some hum softly, their tones merging with the wind's own music. It feels less like a ritual and more like a conversation between humans and the invisible. Nomadic shepherds once believed wind tea could predict weather. If the liquid tasted sweet, rain was coming. If metallic, storms. If flavorless, peace. They carried bamboo straws instead of kettles, claiming that boiling is for the impatient. You chuckle. So basically, meteorology by mouthfeel. Exactly, he says, pleased. You lie back on the grass, cup still in hand. Above you, the sky stretches endless and blue, streaked with faint trails of cirrus clouds. The wind roars over you like an ocean, filling your ears until thoughts dissolve. For a moment, you feel yourself expanding, your skin porous, your breath synchronizing with the mountains. Historians still argue whether such rituals were symbolic breathing exercises or actual attempts at brewing condensation in high-altitude air. Some field reports mention sky teas prepared in Himalayan monasteries by leaving cups overnight to collect dew, later consumed as sacred infusions. The line between faith and physics blurs again, just the way you've come to like it. Your guide breaks the silence. When you drink the wind, he says softly, you learn humility. No hand can command it. No fire can shape it. You only receive. You swirl the last drop in your cup. So this is about surrender. He nods. Yes. And about remembering that breath itself is a kind of tea, steeped in every life that ever was. It sounds lofty, but something about it lands deep inside you. You inhale, hold, and exhale slowly, tasting the wind on the way out. It's faintly sweet, metallic, infinite. When the last gust fades, the bamboo pipes fall silent, their song complete. The villagers begin to pack their empty cups with quiet reverence. No one speaks, they don't have to. The silence left behind hums like an aftertaste. Your guide finally stands. You've tasted earth, moon, and wind, he says. Next, we go where heat and ice meet, the realm of storms. You groan. Please tell me there's at least a bed involved. He laughs. Only clouds. Very soft ones. As you descend the ridge, the valley below shimmers. You glance once more at the circle of bamboo pipes. They look ordinary now, inert. But when the wind shifts, you swear you hear one last note, a whisper, rising faintly, like the world taking a long, contented sip. By the time you reach the next camp, the air has changed. It feels charged, alive, as though it remembers thunder. Clouds are rolling in from the south, dragging their long grey bellies over the ridge. The guide seems pleased, almost smug. Perfect brewing weather, he says, as if lightning is just another spice on the shelf. You raise an eyebrow. You do realize that perfect brewing weather sounds like a hazard warning. He grins. Only for those who drink slowly. The camp sits on a plateau where the land breaks into jagged steps of black stone. Every surface glistens with moisture, each crevice steaming faintly. In the distance, thunder mutters like an old man with strong opinions. This, the guide tells you, is Agni Jal Desh, the land of fire and water. It's where the ancient tea makers learned how to balance opposites, lightning heat and monsoon rain, boiling and cooling in the same breath. He gestures toward a ring of small, dark pots set into the ground, half filled with rainwater. Here, he says, the tea brews itself. You only need to invite the storm. Invite it, you repeat. Like, RSVP the weather. He chuckles. Exactly. The clouds are polite. They never strike unannounced. The ritual, he explains, was known as Mef Chai, storm tea. In old texts, it was said to carry both purification and chaos. The idea was to let lightning itself heat the water, tea born from the clash of sky and earth. You suspect OSHA wouldn't approve. You sit under a rock overhang as the villagers begin their preparations. They scatter powdered herbs into each pot, leaves from tea shrubs that grow on cliff edges, infused with salt from dried riverbeds. The scent rises, sharp, electric, slightly metallic. Smells like the inside of a battery, you mutter. Your guide nods approvingly. Good. It means the sky is listening. The first drops of rain arrive, fat, warm, and spaced like punctuation. The villagers lift their faces to the sky. The sound builds quickly from a patter to a roar, until the plateau becomes a mirror of liquid silver. Thunder cracks overhead, so close you feel it in your ribs. Now watch, your guide whispers. Lightning forks across the sky, striking somewhere beyond the ridge. The pots tremble, steam bursts up, and for a split second the rain seems to pause, then continue, softer now, like applause fading. You edge forward cautiously. The air smells charged, almost sweet, the metallic tang replaced by something fresh and clean. Did that actually just happen? You ask. Of course, he says. The storm brews faster than fire ever could. He picks up a wooden ladle and pours you a portion from the nearest pot. The tea glows faintly blue, like bottled weather. You hesitate, because glowing liquids rarely end well, but curiosity wins. You sip. It's shockingly cold. Then warm. Then cold again. The flavor shifts faster than your brain can track. First salt, then smoke, then something floral and citrusy, like the memory of sunshine after rain. It fizzes faintly on your tongue, like carbonated serenity. That's impossible, you murmur. He smiles. That's nature. It doesn't care what you call impossible. You take another sip, and your vision feels sharper, edges more defined, colors brighter. The wind tastes clean. Somewhere deep in your chest, it feels like thunder has nested, quietly purring. Mainstream fact time. Ancient Indian texts like the Atharva Veda describe rain rituals where herbs were placed in open vessels to be kissed by the lightning. While it's unlikely anyone literally brewed tea with electricity, these rites likely inspired metaphors about energy infusion, the merging of cosmic fire and earthly water. It's a poetic way to describe balance, but also, frankly, a terrifying way to make a beverage. Still, historians argue whether lightning-related rituals were practical experiments or symbolic theater. Some say early metallurgists used similar setups to study how heat affects minerals. Others insist these were spiritual performances meant to honor the storm gods. Either way, the Meph Chai myth stands as one of the more dramatic chapters in the story of celestial tea. Some Himalayan monasteries reportedly brewed thunder tea by capturing rainwater only during storms, believing that its electrical spirit could cure lethargy. According to one record, monks who drank too much would stay awake for 3 days straight and start reciting Sanskrit backward. You grin. So, the original energy drink. Your guide nods. Yes, except without branding. The rain slows to a drizzle. Steam rises off the plateau in long, ghostly ribbons. You set your empty cup beside you, feeling oddly calm, like your nerves have been rebooted. Your guide crouches, drawing patterns in the wet earth with his finger. Fire and water, he murmurs. They chase each other, always. To make perfect tea, you must let them both win. You glance up at the clouds still brooding over the peaks. Seems like they're still arguing. He chuckles. They always are. That's what keeps the world interesting. He pours the remaining tea over the rocks, and the steam coils upward, twisting into fleeting shapes, first a spiral, then something almost like a hand waving goodbye. You blink, unsure if that's the lightning residue or your imagination steeped too long. As you begin descending toward the valley again, the guide speaks softly. We have tasted light, dark, air, and storm. But the ancients spoke of one more, Ratri Chai, the tea of dreams. It cannot be brewed awake. You stop walking. Wait, so now you're telling me I have to dream my next cup? He nods, perfectly serious. Sleep is the final ingredient. You sigh. Fantastic. I've been practicing that my whole life. The path back winds through mist so thick it feels like walking through breath. Each droplet catches faint glints of light, like fragments of shattered stars. You wonder, maybe every storm is just the sky brewing its own tea, spilling a little now and then. As you reach the shelter of a grove, you look back one last time. The plateau still smokes faintly, thunder muttering distant lullabies. The pots glimmer under the last slant of light. For a heartbeat, you imagine the sky leaning down, taking a sip from its own creation. The storm follows you halfway down the valley before surrendering to calm. By the time you reach the forest, the rain has softened into a fine silver mist that glows in the early moonlight. You can smell petrichor and damp leaves, a perfume so ancient that it feels like the earth itself is exhaling relief. Your guide walks silently, a bundle slung across his shoulder. He looks over, eyes reflecting the last flicker of lightning. "Tonight," he says quietly, "you won't need a fire." You arch a brow. "We're going cold brew again." He shakes his head. "Not cold. Not hot. Just elsewhere." You follow him to a clearing surrounded by tall, whispering sal trees. In the center sits a wide, flat stone etched with symbols you don't recognize, circles, spirals, and what looks suspiciously like a constellation shaped like a teacup. The air here feels dense, as if gravity has turned sentimental. He lays his bundle down and pulls out what appears to be a pillow made of woven reeds. "You'll need this," he says. "For what?" "Napping mid-ritual." "Exactly," he replies without irony. You laugh softly, half expecting him to start chanting or light incense. Instead, he sits cross-legged and gestures for you to do the same. "This is Ratri chai," he says. "The tea of dreams. It's not brewed by hand. It's brewed by surrender." You hesitate, then lie back on the reed pillow. The stone beneath you feels warm, warmer than it should be after rain. Above, the clouds have thinned, revealing a broken patchwork of stars. They flicker between branches like blinking fireflies. "Close your eyes," he says. "Breathe in the night. Let it steep." So you do. The sounds of the forest dissolve, crickets, wind, your own heartbeat, until everything blends into a slow rhythm. The scent of wet earth fades, replaced by something sweeter, like distant jasmine. You begin to drift, not asleep exactly, but hovering somewhere between thoughts and dreams. He speaks again, voice barely above a whisper. "The ancients believed that the mind has its own water, and the stars its own fire. When you sleep, they meet and make the soul's tea." You murmur something about that being the most poetic definition of REM sleep you've ever heard, but your words melt before they reach your lips. Images begin to bubble up, a river made of starlight, constellations swirling like loose tea leaves, the moon lowering a silver ladle into your hands. You sip, and it tastes like memory, like stories you forgot you loved. Somewhere distant, your waking self wonders if this is hypnosis or caffeine withdrawal. But the rest of you doesn't care. Historians still argue whether dream teas existed as literal sleep-inducing brews or as metaphorical rites of inner reflection. Certain Ayurvedic manuscripts mention herbs like ashwagandha and brahmi, known to calm the mind, as doorways to celestial tasting. Others claim that Ratri chai referred to guided lucid dreaming practices used by ancient seers to interpret stellar movements subconsciously. In essence, astronomy meets nap time. Your dream sharpens. You find yourself standing in an ancient observatory, massive stone wheels turning under a velvet sky. Stars whirl like grinding gears. A voice, not quite your own, says, "To know the heavens, you must taste them." You lift a cup carved from crystal. Inside it swirls a liquid so dark it seems to pull light in. When you drink, galaxies spiral across your vision, each sip a constellation unfurling. And then, quiet. You wake to dawn light spilling through the trees. Your mouth is dry, your hands cold, but your chest feels heavy, in the comforting way a full heart does. Your guide sits beside you, watching the horizon. You've brewed it, he says simply. You rub your eyes. Brewed what? I didn't even boil water. He smiles faintly. You brewed understanding. The most fragile flavor of all. You sit up slowly. The clearing is brighter now, the carvings on the stone faintly glowing as if touched by starlight. You touch one of the spirals. It's warm, pulsing gently. What happened? You whisper. You dreamed in the rhythm of the constellations, he says. The sky poured through you. That's how the old tea makers learned timing. They followed not the sun or moon, but their own sleeping stars. He opens a small pouch and pulls out a handful of leaves, silver, almost translucent. These grow only near stones like this, he explains. They are said to absorb dream energy. When brewed, they help you remember what your heart learned while your mind was asleep. Dream caffeine, you say, amused. Exactly, he replies, dead serious. Keeps the soul awake. You can't help laughing softly, even as part of you wonders how much of what you saw was real. Maybe none of it. Maybe all of it. You glance at your reflection in a puddle nearby. Your eyes look different somehow, a little more patient. In some Himalayan villages, children were told to place a teacup under their pillows so the stars could pour dreams into it. In the morning, if dew had gathered inside, they were said to have been visited by friendly constellations. If the cup stayed dry, well, clearly someone forgot to brush their teeth before bed. You chuckle. So I guess dream hygiene matters. Always, he nods. Even for stars. You help him pack the reed pillow and pouch. The clearing feels lighter now, as though you've steeped the whole forest in quiet. When you leave, you glance back. The carvings on the stone seem to fade into plain rock again, pretending they were never there. The guide walks ahead, his silhouette framed by gold light filtering through trees. Tomorrow, he says, we reach the final horizon, where day and night trade secrets. There you'll learn how to brew time itself. You groan softly. Oh sure. No big deal. Just brewing time. Totally achievable. He laughs, the sound echoing through the trees. Everything is steeped, sooner or later. As you follow him back toward the path, the last traces of your dreams still linger. The taste of starlight, the hum of galaxies dissolving in your pulse. You realize that maybe the perfect tea isn't a drink at all, but a way of noticing how the universe breathes. And somewhere, faintly, you swear you hear the stars sigh in agreement. The next morning feels different. Not just lighter, stranger, like the air itself forgot which century it's supposed to belong to. The valley ahead glows faintly under the pale shimmer of dawn, but there's no sense of direction. You can't quite tell where the sun begins or the moon ends. Both hang in the sky, awkwardly sharing space like roommates who forgot to coordinate schedules. Your guide walks ahead in silence, staff tapping rhythmically on the path. He doesn't look back. His pace is steady, unhurried, like someone following a rhythm you can't hear yet. After an hour of walking, you reach a ledge overlooking what can only be described as an illusion made of geography. Below, a massive plain ripples like glass, half reflecting daylight, half swallowing it. The line where light and shadow meet bends slowly, breathing. You exhale. So this is the horizon of time, he says simply, where yesterday finishes cooling and tomorrow begins to boil. You glance sideways at him. You know, you're great at making things sound both wise and impossible. He grins. It's a gift. The path descends in loose spirals, marked by stones that glow faintly in alternating colors: amber, silver, amber, silver. The guide explains they represent the eternal dance between Surya, the sun, and Chandra, the moon. The ancients believed, he says, That perfect tea requires not just heat and water, but time stirred in both directions, forward and backward. You nod thoughtfully. So, we're making time tea? Called chai, he confirms. The brew that forgives clocks. The plain stretches wider as you approach, and now you can see what it truly is, a lake, but half its surface gleams golden and half dark as obsidian. The division runs clean through the middle, a reflection of day on one side and night on the other. The wind tastes metallic, humming faintly with vibration. Your guide sets down his pack and begins unpacking 2 cups, one carved from black stone, the other from translucent quartz. He places them side by side on the edge of the water. One for memory, he says, tapping the dark cup. One for possibility. You kneel beside him, curiosity tingling. And what goes inside? Time, he says. But only if you're patient. He scoops water from both halves of the lake, first from the dark, then from the light. When poured together in a single pot, the liquid refuses to mix. Instead, it swirls in 2 layers like oil and ink. You watch as he drops in crushed tea leaves, half roasted, half raw, and sets the pot in the narrow band of twilight where sun and moonlight meet. No fire. No cold. Just balance. The surface begins to ripple faintly. You could swear you hear a ticking, not from any clock, but from the tea itself, like tiny heartbeats aligning. The ancients said, he murmurs, that whoever drinks cold chai glimpses moments they've forgotten and moments not yet born. Sounds exhausting, you say. Only if you take it seriously, he replies, smiling. Historians still argue whether time-based rituals like this one were symbolic or practical. Some claim early astronomers used mirrored lakes to study the changing positions of stars during solstices, essentially turning nature into a calendar. Others insist these ceremonies represented philosophical experiments in perception. How long could one hold still and feel time without measuring it? The boundary between science and spirituality was always deliciously porous. The pot begins to steam faintly, though no visible heat touches it. The scent rises, sweet and smoky, but there's something else, too, nostalgia. You inhale and, absurdly, remember things you hadn't thought of in years. The sound of your grandmother's old kettle, the sunlight that used to fall on your first apartment floor, that one cup of tea that actually made you feel infinite for 5 minutes. You blink, startled. Did that just happen? Your guide nods. Time is aromatic. It finds its own exits. He pours the tea into both cups. The light one gleams gold, the dark one glows faint blue, like moonlight liquefied. Drink both, he says. But never at the same pace. You raise the light cup first. It's warm, mellow, gentle, like sipping liquid dawn. Your pulse slows, your body relaxes. Then, cautiously, you sip from the dark cup. Cold floods your veins. The taste is sharp, bittersweet, ancient. The contrast hits like déjà vu and prophecy at once. You search for the right word. Temporal. He laughs softly. Yes. The flavor of remembering. You set both cups down, your mind buzzing. The world around you shifts subtly, the lake ripples, and for a fleeting instant, you see yourself from another time, sitting on this same shore but older. Your reflection lifts its cup and nods as though approving of your progress. Then it fades, replaced by your present self again. You swallow hard. So that's normal. Entirely, he says. For the first few centuries of practice. You shoot him a look, but he's already sipping calmly, as if he hasn't just served you existential tea. An old legend from Rajasthan, tea so perfectly timed that it aged backward. Villagers claimed the more you drank, the younger your worries became. Unfortunately, the effect ended abruptly. leaving drinkers with toddler-level tantrums and the desperate craving for biscuits. You grin. So, the world's first anti-aging scam. More like time travel with indigestion, he says. The wind shifts, blending sunlight and moonlight into a single hue, silver gold, impossible to name. The tea in both cups settles into perfect stillness. Your guide empties what remains back into the lake. Time, he says softly, is meant to be shared, not stored. You stand, watching the two halves of the lake shimmer against each other, never mixing yet always touching. It feels like standing inside a heartbeat, the world inhaling and exhaling through centuries. You turn to him. So, have we reached the end? Almost, he replies. Only one more sip remains, the tea that doesn't exist until you share it. You tilt your head. That's cryptic even for you. He smiles. You'll see. As the light shifts, both sun and moon seem to glance your way, briefly aligned in the same horizon. The air hums, thick and golden, as if the universe just took a deep, satisfied breath. The road to the final tea is almost silent. Not quiet in the ordinary sense, but charged, like the pause between a question and its answer. You walk through a valley so wide that even the echoes seem to hesitate before returning. The guide strides ahead, robes brushing against dry grass that glints under a sun neither high nor low. Somewhere in that liminal light, the day feels paused. He turns to you. Every brew until now has been about elements: earth, wind, storm, dream, time. But the ancients believed one more remained. The ingredient that cannot be weighed, grown, or bottled. You raise an eyebrow. You mean love, don't you? He grins. Close. But smaller. More dangerous. Regret. Sharing, he says simply. You blink. That's not dangerous. Oh, but it is, he replies. Because once shared, flavor changes forever. The path leads to a cluster of ruins, stone pillars carved with half-erased figures. A wide slab stands in the center, blackened from countless fires. The guide kneels, brushing away dust. This was once a gathering place, he says. Travelers brought their own leaves, their own stories. They brewed together, no matter rank or clan. They called it Sanga Chai, the tea of many mouths. You can almost hear it, the murmur of people long gone, the clatter of cups, laughter spilling like boiling water. The guide hands you a bundle of dried leaves, fragrant and oddly familiar. Yours, he says. You've carried them all along. You unwrap them, surprised. They look like fragments from every tea you've drunk so far: silver moon leaves, wind herbs, storm salt, dream petals, time dust. Each carries a memory, and now they blend into one improbable bouquet. Mix them, he instructs. Not in the pot. In your hands. You cup them gently, rubbing the leaves between your palms. Their scent rises, a fusion of everything you've experienced: lightning and jasmine, smoke and air, sleep and starlight. The warmth of your hands releases faint steam, as if memory itself is volatile. Now breathe on it, he says. You exhale slowly, and the leaves shiver. The edges curl, not burning but brightening, until each flake glows like an ember. The air fills with tiny motes of light drifting upward, dissolving into the soft wind. He nods. Good. The ancients said that to share tea, one must first let it escape. He sets out a communal kettle, wide, cracked, and patched with metal bands older than you can imagine. Around it, villagers begin to gather. Faces you've seen before: the potter, the old woman with cloud-colored hair, the child who once offered you moonlight sugar. Somehow, they've all found their way here. You glance at the guide. Did you plan this? He smiles. Tea has a way of sending invitations. He tips your glowing leaves into the kettle. Each mote hisses faintly as it touches water. The mixture steams, scent deepening into something that smells like comfort and courage braided together. The villagers add their own herbs, mint, cardamom, wild ginger, whatever life handed them. Soon the air hums with aroma. This is how the ancients brewed the final cup, he says. Not for themselves, but for each other. Each sip was a conversation, a translation of the stars into kindness. He ladles the tea into small clay cups and passes them around. When yours reaches you, it's warm and slightly uneven, perfect in its imperfection. You raise it with both hands. To what do we toast? You ask. He considers. To everything we didn't understand, but still tried to taste. You smile and take a sip. The flavor is impossible to describe. It's not the sum of the others, it's the bridge between them. Sweet where bitterness lingered, grounded where wind had scattered. It tastes like community, laughter, small shared silences, and the deep relief of belonging. Historians still argue whether the Sangha Chai gatherings were social ceremonies or informal knowledge exchanges. Some see them as precursors to philosophical debates held over shared cups. Others believe they were simply excuses for weary astronomers to gossip about constellations. Either way, they marked something new. The idea that wisdom could be steeped communally, that enlightenment was better when poured for two. Your guide chuckles as he recalls an old proverb. A cup alone is medicine, a pot shared is mischief. Apparently, the ancient tea circles were notorious for sparking impromptu songs, debates, even marriages. Once, a prince supposedly disguised himself as a tea vendor just to join a Sangha gathering, falling in love with a poet who thought his royal hands looked suspiciously manicured. You laugh. So, the first dating app was a teapot. Exactly, he says, eyes twinkling. Swipe left for bitter brews. As everyone drinks, the air brightens subtly. The horizon ripples, as if the stars themselves lean in to listen. The mixture seems endless. No matter how many cups are poured, the kettle stays full. You realize that's the secret. Every time someone laughs or tells a story, the liquid shimmers brighter, refilling itself. You sip again, slower this time. It's like drinking warmth that remembers your name. Around you, conversations rise and fall like gentle waves. Someone hums. Someone else pours another round. Even the wind seems to join in, swirling softly through the ruins like a friendly ghost. When the kettle finally empties, no one seems sad. The guide simply smiles and tips the last drop onto the earth. Steam rises, curling into shapes that might be faces, or maybe just your imagination steeped too long again. He turns to you. You've learned the last recipe, he says. Now all that remains is what comes after brewing, the stillness before sleep. You tilt your cup upside down. A single droplet clings to the rim, catching the light like a miniature moon. It slides down slowly, falls, and disappears into the dust. You whisper, half to yourself, "Guess that's the final sip." He nods. And the first dream. The crowd disperses quietly, their laughter echoing like fading bells. The ruins fall silent again, content. You and your guide stand together under the vast twilight sky, the taste of shared tea still warm on your tongue. You look up, and for the first time, you notice that the stars aren't just points of light anymore. They pulse faintly, rhythmically, like they're breathing in sync with you. Maybe they've been doing that all along, waiting for someone to notice. He glances at you one last time. Ready to rest? You nod. Completely. The night settles around you like a blanket still warm from the day's laughter. The ruins fade into silhouettes, and the horizon blurs into a single, shimmering edge of darkness and starlight. Your guide moves quietly, stacking the last of the clay cups, his motions unhurried, like someone who's learned patience from galaxies. You've drunk the final tea, he says softly, but the night still has one more steep left in it. You watch him pour a small stream of water into the ashes of the communal kettle. The steam rises, twisting upward, forming shapes that look almost like written script, a story unspooling into the sky. For a fleeting moment, you think you can read it. Lines about journeys, flavor, loss, and the small miracle of being awake long enough to notice both. Then the vapor dissolves. You sit beside him, feeling the earth cool beneath you. So this is the end, you ask. He shakes his head gently. No. Only the pause. Even stars need to cool before shining again. Above, constellations drift slowly, a parade of memory. You can name a few now: the hunter, the swan, the tea ladle, your private edition, still unofficial but deeply satisfying. The sky hums faintly, a soft vibration you feel more than hear, as if space itself is purring. You know, you murmur, if the ancients used stars to brew perfect tea, maybe what they were really trying to make was meaning. He chuckles. Meaning and tea taste the same when done right. Warm, a little bitter, and always fleeting. He leans back on his elbows. Do you remember your first sip? You nod. The sunlight tea. Burned my tongue. I thought that was the point. It was, he says. Every tea burns until you learn to wait. You fall into a comfortable silence, the kind that has no need for words. Somewhere in the distance, the wind shifts through the sal trees, carrying faint echoes of the people who brewed before you, voices laid like leaves, laughter folded into the soil. Historians still argue whether any of this truly happened: the starlit teas, the lightning kettles, the dream brews. Some insist they are metaphors stitched together from old myths. Others point to ruins and carvings that show constellations mirrored in the shapes of cups and pots, suggesting something real flickered behind the poetry. But as your guide once said, the truth of tea isn't in what it proves, it's in what it softens. You exhale, watching your breath drift away like incense. So, what now? He smiles faintly. Now you let the flavor fade. Only then will it stay. He stands, brushing dust from his robes. One last thing, he says, holding out his palm. Resting there is a single tea leaf, dark, veined with silver threads that glint under starlight. Plant this when you return home. It won't grow like others. Its roots drink time. Its leaves drink silence. You take it reverently. Will it make the same tea? No, he says. It will make your own. He bows once, the kind of bow that feels like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. When you look up again, he's already walking away, his silhouette fading into the horizon's dim shimmer. You stay for a while, just listening, to the quiet, to the heartbeat of the mountain beneath you, to your own slow breath. The stars seem closer now, maybe because you've finally stopped chasing them. You lie back on the cool stone. The taste of the last tea lingers, sweet, smoky, and infinite. You close your eyes. The world tilts gently, and you realize the story has looped. Somewhere, someone else is just beginning their first sip, staring up at these same stars, wondering if they're being watched back. You smile at the thought. May their brew be kind, you whisper. The stars blink. A soft breeze sighs through the valley, carrying the faintest scent of tea leaves and rain. It feels like a benediction. As the night deepens around you, the pace slows to the rhythm of your own breathing. The stars, once sharp and vivid, begin to blur, turning into soft beads of light drifting in a sea of velvet dark. The mountain exhales. The valley hums faintly, a lullaby of unseen currents. You feel the story settle inside you, still warm, steeping slowly through your thoughts. Every moment of your journey, each sip of sun, moon, shadow, wind, storm, and dream, lingers in quiet layers, blending until they taste like memory. The ancient astronomers would say that the stars are simply old fires learning to whisper. Maybe you're whispering back now, one heartbeat at a time. The ground beneath you feels solid and endless, a kind of gentle gravity that promises rest. The air cools, sweet with the trace of cardamom and ash. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a night bird calls once, and the sound folds perfectly into silence. You inhale once more, deep and easy. The warmth in your chest spreads outward, a soft wave dissolving tension, thought, and distance. The story doesn't end. It drifts, slowly, like rising steam, curling back toward the sky that first inspired it. For now, you can let go. The stars will keep watch. The mountain will hold your dreams. And the tea, ancient, eternal, ever brewing, will remember your name when the dawn begins to stir. Sleep well, traveler. The kettle of the cosmos is still warm.